It is my honor to stand before you this morning, but it's very humbling to do so after these religious leaders. I'm just a guy who built companies for a living. But frankly, I don't think I've had to speak on the nature of religion leadership since my own bar mitzvah 31 years ago. Now, this is going to be a lot easier than that. My Torah portion was Leviticus chapter 18. For those of you who are scholars of the Bible, it basically covers a lot of really, really terrible things that if you do, you get stoned. So anyway, this is a breakfast about prayer, but it is also a prayer about leadership. And so I wanted to share a story from the Bible about one of the greatest kings in the history of Israel. It's not a story about David, from whom my son is named, but his son Solomon. Now, everyone knows the story of Solomon splitting the baby, or more accurately, not splitting the baby, from the book of Kings, and the wisdom it showed in using that threat to suss out who the baby's actual mother was. The story is recounted in chapter 3 of the first book of Kings, verses 16 to 28. But what few of us in this room know is how Solomon became so wise. Turns out, Solomon was only 20 years old when David chose him to be king, and you thought you were doing pretty good at 40. So how could a 20-year-old have what it took to be king? Remarkably, we learn that in the exact same chapter of the split baby story in verses 5 to 15 of the book of Kings. I'm going to read portions of that. The Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night, and God said, "Ask, what shall I grant you?" Now, the 20-year-old Solomon could have asked for anything. Flush with power, young and inexperienced, imagine what you might have asked for when you were 20. But Solomon said this, "Lord my God, you have made me your servant king in place of my father David. But I am a young lad with no experience in leadership. I find myself in the midst of the people, your chosen people, a people too numerous to be numbered or counted. Grant me, your servant, an understanding mind to judge your people, to distinguish between good and bad, to be able to judge this vast people." So how did God respond? The Lord was pleased that Solomon had asked for this, and God said to him, "Because you asked for this, you did not ask for long life, you did not ask for riches, you did not ask for the life of your enemies, but you asked for the discernment in dispensing justice. I now do as you have spoken. I grant you a wise and discerning mind. There has never been anyone like you before, nor will anyone like you arise again." But he then continued, "And I also grant you what you did not ask for, both riches and glory all your life, the like of which no king has ever had. And I will further grant you long life, if you will walk in my ways and observe my laws and commandments, as did your father David." Now, nothing in the Bible is by coincidence, and it is not coincidence that the next verse after this story immediately tells the story of the split baby. It comes immediately after this dream. Consider this, by asking for God's help to do what was right, God rewarded Solomon not only with the wisdom he was seeking, but all the health and riches of the earth. For when we do what is right, good is what happens. Now, I don't believe that Governor DeSantis will ever be asked to determine the parentage of a baby. But over the coming years, there will be countless times in which his and all of our leaders' judgment is tested, where the answer is not clear, where the opposition is entrenched, and where the right path is the harder path. But I've learned in my own life that the harder path is almost always the right one. So I would ask that all of you join me in asking of God that our Lieutenant Governor and Lieutenant Governor what Solomon asked of him, that he grant them an understanding mind to judge his people and to distinguish good from bad, and to grant them a wise and discerning mind. Speaking of a wise and discerning mind, it is my pleasure to introduce our next Lieutenant Governor, Jeanette Nunez. One thing I can tell you about Jeanette is that she already embodies the characteristics of another biblical figure, the patience of Job. For the past 2 years, Jeanette largely ran the House floor, in which I and Representative Ponder served, moderating difficult debates on difficult issues. She even had to listen to long-winded legislators drone on and on. I was never one of them. But this introduction is especially special to me for a different reason. 22 years ago, a college senior concentrating in government was looking for a topic on which to write his senior honors thesis. This particular senior was lazy and didn't want to read the dozens and dozens of academic books on a particular topic before penning his opus, as was the case for every honors thesis in the history of the school. So one night he lay awake thinking, was there any subject in the history of government on which no one had ever written anything academically? Could anything have escaped the attention of political scientists for centuries? Now, God did not come to him in a dream to give him the answer, but this boy did have an epiphany. And here's the result: Lieutenant Governors, the office and its powers, by me. So, Jeanette, I have a copy for you. I don't have that many left. I took this from my mom, so you're going to have to give it back to me after you're done. I think you'll find the section on Florida surprisingly interesting, and I do hope that you will share it with the governor and his staff. I believe then, and I believe now, that this role has remarkable potential to be a partner to assist the governor. So let me close by saying this. It is my belief that when some enterprising college student has the idea again to write a thesis on lieutenant governors, they'll only have to read one book now. They will write that Jeanette Nunez broke the mold, redefined the role, and helped transform the state. Jeanette, you know where we sit in the legislature if you ever need our help.